CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Naweed Jabakil. Our top stories this hour. A shared destiny. China's President Xi Jinping maps out his vision for the future in front of world leaders. Climate and COVID. G20 leaders look to tackle the planet's two biggest challenges as they meet in person for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Completely unjustified. Britain's Prime Minister tells the EU's chief that French threats may break international law as the row over fishing rights escalates. And jab or job, American workers take to the streets amid a clampdown on employees who won't get the COVID vaccine. Leaders of the world's major economies are meeting for the G20 summit in Italy, with climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic top of the agenda. China's President Xi Jinping has addressed the summit, as Brian Dorman now reports.
Vaccine cooperation was at the top of 5 proposals put forward by China's president at the G20 summit. Xi Jinping said member states should work together in promoting fair distribution as well as research and development. On trade and the economy, Xi urged for multilateralism and respect for the World Trade Organization. He said G20 members should adopt responsible policies to avoid negative spillovers on other developing countries. He also stressed the importance of innovation and green development. On China's policy for a more open market, he highlighted the word honesty.
The ancient Chinese said honesty is the key to the world's code of conduct. That is to say, honesty is the foundation of making friends. China will adhere to its basic national policy of opening up and give full play to the advantages of its super large-scale market and the potential of domestic demand. China will focus on enhancing institutional opening up in terms of rules, regulations, management, and standards, and continue to increase its protection of intellectual property rights. It will also continue to create a market-oriented, lawful, and a fair international business environment for Chinese and foreign companies. I believe China's development will bring more opportunities to all countries and inject more momentum into the world economy.
The Chinese president also underlined the concept of a community with a shared future, especially at a time the world battles a raging pandemic.
Well, our reporters are keeping across the G20 summit for you. Hermione Kitson is in Rome and Julia Chapman is in Moscow. We'll head to the Russian capital in a second. Let's go to Rome first. Hermione, what's been discussed at the summit so far?
Okay, the focus area of talks today was global health and the global economy. A key area of concern is this gap between richer and poorer countries in the fight against COVID-19. So how to bridge that gap to ensure that 70% of the world's population is vaccinated against COVID-19 by the middle of next year. The summit host, the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, he says that cooperation is key, is the only way to move forward.
From the pandemic to climate change to fair and equitable taxation, going it alone is simply not an option. We must do all we can to overcome our differences, and we must rekindle the spirit that led to the creation of this group.
Also this afternoon, the US President Joe Biden, he met with his French, British and German counterparts to talk about Iran and its nuclear program. The US President wants to revive the 2015 nuclear plan, which Donald Trump actually withdrew from in 2018. Other sideline talks this afternoon, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he will meet with counterparts, including the Russian Foreign Minister and also the Director General of the World Health Organization. So it was a very busy day here in Rome.
Yeah, a busy first day. Any idea what's on the agenda, Hermione?
Okay, tomorrow it is all about climate change. There will be 2 sessions of discussion, one about specifically climate change, a second one about sustainable development. G20 countries, they make up 80% of the world's emissions, and so decisions made this weekend can really make an impact. But there are still very deep divisions about the phasing out of coal and also how to limit global warming until 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was outlined in the 2015 Paris Agreement. Also making their voices heard on the topic today with thousands of protesters in Rome who say that the G20 nations really need to take more decisive action on climate change, and they are calling for more concrete commitments this weekend, especially ahead of the COP26 summit in Glasgow next week. So let's just see what kind of commitments can be reached tomorrow during discussions at the G20 summit here in Rome.
Okay, Hermione Kitson for us in Rome. Thank you. Well, another leader that isn't attending the G20 summit in person is Russia's President Vladimir Putin. He delivered his speech via video link. CGTN's Julia Chapman is in Moscow for us. Julia, tell us more about President Putin's speech then.
Mr. Putin covered a range of subjects, all loosely connected to the COVID-19 pandemic. He started with the global economic recovery, which he said was being held back by the large budget deficits maintained by many countries, among them some of the G20 members. He recognized the importance of measures being taken by these countries to prop up their economies and support workers during the difficult times of the pandemic. And he said that Russia, of course, did this as well in 2020, although many here would say that the government didn't do enough to support small businesses. But he did say that in this calendar year, Russia will have a budget surplus, and that will help get the world economy back on track. Another thing that he said was dragging on the world economy is the lack of recognition of all countries' COVID-19 vaccines, among them, of course, Russia's. It has 4 of its own developed vaccines against the virus, none of which are recognized by the WHO, the European Medicines Agency, or many countries, among them some of the G20 ones. And he said that is key to getting the world economy back on track, not least developing countries, many of which are using Russian vaccines. And then he also mentioned the global energy crisis, particularly acute in Europe, which he said had laid bare the need for a reliable supply of energy from producers.
The stability of global energy markets depends directly on the responsible actions of all its participants, both suppliers and consumers, based on a consideration of the long-term interests of both sides. Russia proposes a substantial discussion on this topic in a pragmatic tone, based exclusively on economic thinking.
President Putin there reiterating the Kremlin position that the energy prices are based on actions not just by suppliers but also by buyers, very much rejecting any idea that Russia has been weaponizing energy in an effort to put pressure on European leaders to approve the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
And Julia, President Putin facing a few issues at home. What's his absence from this G20 summit likely to go down like there and abroad?
Well, there's certainly been speculation that he has chosen to attend the G20 summit virtually alone in order to make some sort of a political statement about Russia's attitudes towards this particular platform. Now, the Kremlin has rejected that. They say that he is simply staying home because of the pandemic situation, which of course is very acute here in Russia at the moment, experiencing the country's 4th wave, the worst since the start of the pandemic. And the government really adamant that this is what this is all about. And of course, this isn't the only event that President Putin will be missing in person. He won't be going to the COP26 climate summit either.
Okay, Julia Chapman for us live in Moscow. Thank you. Many Russians are beginning a week-long paid holiday that authorities hope will rein in skyrocketing infection rates and deaths. The Kremlin has advised people against travelling during the period, which ends on the 7th of November. Shops, schools and restaurants have been ordered to close. On Saturday, the government recorded a new daily record of over 40,000 cases, as well as 1,160 deaths. The Chinese mainland has reported 59 cases in the past 24 hours, mostly in the northern Heilongjiang province. Nearly 400 local cases have been reported over the past 2 weeks, affecting 14 provinces. China's speeding up its vaccine booster program as well as vaccinations for children aged 3 to 11. Officials hope to complete inoculations for that group by the end of the year. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the Pfizer vaccine for children aged 5 to 11 for emergency use. Around 28 million young people would be eligible for 1/3 of the adult dose over 2 shots. The decision needs final approval from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is expected later this week. Well, despite U.S. workers overwhelmingly complying with vaccine mandates, there is still some strong resistance, including from health workers, students and the emergency services. But most legal challenges so far are failing, as Karina Huber reports.
Protesters gathered to voice their opposition to a COVID-19 vaccine mandate that went into effect in New York City this Friday. All city workers, including firefighters and police officers, are now required to have had at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Those who refuse can be forced to leave without pay.
Obviously, we've given people a lot of time, first in the voluntary phase, then in the vaccinate or test phase. It's time to keep moving.
The head of the main union representing firefighters has encouraged his unvaccinated members to defy the mandate.
The UFA at this time will explore all avenues to protect our members. We will work with the MLC and the other unions to fight this mandate and keep this a personal choice.
New York's largest police union filed a lawsuit to halt the mandate. It was rejected by a New York state judge. What's happening in New York is a microcosm for what's happening around the rest of the country. Cities and states are increasingly mandating workers get vaccinated. Lawsuits are being launched in response without much success.
The vast majority of these lawsuits are failing. So the vast majority of mandates are being upheld.
Jennifer Pyatt works with an organization that has been tracking legal decisions related to COVID-19 vaccine mandates. She says only 4 out of 36 mandates have been struck down. Courts are upholding a state's right to implement vaccine mandates using a 1905 Supreme Court decision as precedent.
Called Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the case was brought forth by a Lutheran pastor who objected to a vaccine mandate during a smallpox outbreak. The court ruled in favor of the state, saying no one has a constitutional right to refuse vaccination.
So courts are relying on that case in large part and saying it's the same situation here. And in fact, some courts are saying it's even easier now because of exemptions that are being required that were not provided, back in Jacobson's time.
In Jacobson's time, there was a medical exemption, but no religious exemption. Most of the vaccine mandates today include both loopholes, making it exceedingly difficult to argue that vaccine mandates violate an individual's constitutional rights. This is giving cities and states the confidence to impose more mandates. Karina Huber, CGTN, Warwick, Massachusetts.
Still ahead here on The World Today. China lays out its plan to cap carbon emissions ahead of the UN's climate summit.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Climate change is happening right now. World leaders prepare for vital talks that will change the course of humanity. Action could save millions of lives. Failure could cost many more. Do they have the will to act quickly? Does the planet have the time to wait? Follow full coverage from the COP26 climate talks here on CGTN.
This week on Razor, in a COP26 special, we'll look at storing carbon dioxide by turning it into rock, and the dream of clean energy from nuclear fusion.
The main advantage is that no CO2 is produced through the fusion process, so fusion is the perfect energy to combat climate change.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. A shared destiny. China's President Xi Jinping maps out his vision for the future in front of world leaders. Climate and COVID. G20 leaders look to tackle the planet's two biggest challenges as they meet in person for the first time since the start of the pandemic. And jab or job, American workers take to the streets amid a clampdown on employees who won't get the COVID vaccine. Britain's Prime Minister has met the EU's chief, where he's raised concerns about the escalating row with the French over post-Brexit fishing rights. Boris Johnson told Ursula von der Leyen that French threats to block ports and increase checks were completely unjustified and that they could break international law. France has been angered about the UK denying licences to dozens of French boats. President Emmanuel Macron told the Financial Times the UK is risking its credibility for going back on its commitments. Well, CGTN's Guy Henderson is live for us now in London and following the story. Guy, Boris Johnson suggesting that the dispute here may get a lot worse.
Yeah, he is indeed, Naweed. We've seen some pictures emerge in the last hour or so of President Macron and Prime Minister Johnson at a photo opportunity at the G20 summit in Rome, smiling at each other, knocking elbows, and in between them is the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Could she be a peace broker in this escalating dispute? Well, that's not looking likely at the moment. Prime Minister Johnson met with her on Saturday afternoon, according to the Reuters news agency. And as you say, Johnson is reported to have told her that he and his government here in London see the French actions as completely unjustifiable. And he repeated that claim that we've heard several times in media interviews during the day, that the British government believes that France may be breaking international law.
I must say, we are a bit worried that France may be about to become in breach, or is already in breach of the trade and cooperation agreement that we've struck.
We've also heard from the UK Brexit Minister, Lord Frost. He's also quoted on Reuters as calling for France and the European Union to step back from rhetoric that he says could make finding a resolution more difficult. He has confirmed, according to Reuters at least, that the UK is actively considering triggering this dispute mechanism which was set up as part of the Brexit negotiations last year to deal with fishing issues. That could get messy. It could lead to an arbitration process. It could lead to calls for compensation. In a worst-case scenario, it could even lead, although this might be some way down the line from where we are now, but could even lead to the suspension of that entire hard-fought free trade agreement between the UK and the EU. Naweed.
So the UK are considering stronger measures. What have the French been saying?
Well, perhaps predictably, the French side's view is that this is all Britain's fault. They believe that it is just a handful of fishing licences, French fishing licences, that the Brits have not renewed and that France says should be renewed. And they say that blame should be squarely laid on the British side. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, he did an interview with the Financial Times, the British newspaper, over the weekend, in which he said that Britain's credibility was at stake in this issue, not just with fisheries and upholding its side of the bargain as part of that Brexit agreement on that issue, but also with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is another part of that Brexit agreement. Those are the kind of words that I think will sting a little bit in London. Of course, since Brexit, the UK is now looking to, as quickly as possible, move ahead with negotiating and completing a series of other trade agreements with non-EU countries, and for a traditionally very close partner with the UK to be making that kind of accusation and suggestion that perhaps the UK wouldn't uphold those kind of international agreements, well, that will hurt.
OK, thanks for that, Guy. Guy Henderson for us live in London. Greece has rescued a Turkish-flagged cargo ship carrying 400 migrants off the island of Crete. The boat sent a distress signal after suffering engine problems. It was anchored to safety and is now sailing in international waters. Reports say that Greece's shipping ministry has asked Turkey to accept the vessel's return. The Coast Guard said it was one of the largest ever rescue operations carried out in the eastern Mediterranean. Sudanese troops have shot dead 2 people during mass protests against the army's seizure of power. That's according to reports from doctors on the ground. Hundreds of thousands of people are marching in the capital Khartoum and other cities. It comes 6 days after the army detained the country's prime minister and dissolved the government. At least 11 protesters have been killed and another 170 people injured in clashes with security forces over the past week. Well, it's the eve of the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow as world leaders descend on the Scottish city to try and find a way to curb global warming. China has unveiled its strategy for weaning the country off fossil fuels. CGTN's Zhou Jiaxin now reports.
For decades, coal in China, the world's biggest developing country, has been a major source of energy security. To tackle global warming, China has pledged to cap the fossil fuels, even while facing an energy crunch.
Clean and low-carbon energy is crucial to future sustainable development. In recent years, China has been largely adjusting and upgrading the energy structure by diverting heavy reliance on coal to low-carbon consumption.
China says it had decreased the proportion of coal in the mix from 72% in 2005 to 57% in 2020. And for the first time, the installed capacity of renewable energy is expected to surpass that of coal-fired power generation in 2021.
China has integrated those emission reduction targets into its broader social and development planning and strategy. And with those combination of command and control policy together with market-based policy and also standard policy to deliver its target. For this year, China has launched the largest carbon trading scheme in the world to increase the cost efficiency of those policy and matters.
This September, China told the UN it will halt new coal projects overseas. To fill in the energy vacuum, China vows to step up wind and solar power. 1.2 billion kilowatts in its total installed capacity by 2030, also a test of the resilience of its electricity network.
Indeed, it seems to be a very harsh and difficult target for China. But I think it is feasible given the experience of China to reduce carbon emission in the last decade. If we keep the pace, we can achieve the target for 2030.
And that target compared to the 2005 level is to lower its greenhouse gas emissions per unit of GDP by over 65%, while increasing the share of non-fossil fuel energy consumption to around 25%.
Achieving the peak of carbon emission is an integral part of China's ecological civilization. That means it is the internal demand to make weather clean, to prevent global warming. That's very important.
Ahead of this week's climate conference in Glasgow, China says parties should continue their support for poor countries in funding, technology and capacity building and transform goals into action.
周嘉欣 CGTN Beijing.
The season for Beijing's Youth Ice Hockey League has begun. More than 3,000 kids, some as young as 6, are participating. Cao Chu-feng looks at how they're enjoying the winter sport.
These 8-year-old players might be young, but they are already showing huge talent and passion for ice hockey.
I practice ice hockey every day. Working as a team with my friends is what I like the most about the sport.
Ice hockey is one of the only contact sports played on a team in winter. The parents of these young players believe the value of learning the sport at a young age goes far beyond just physical fitness.
I always wanted my child to learn a team sport. I think boys will not only learn sport skills on the team, but also how to collaborate with others.
I think kids are being a bit overprotected these days. Ice hockey is a good sport to learn how to face setbacks and frustrations.
The Beijing Youth Ice Hockey Club League is organized by the Beijing Municipal Sports Bureau with the Beijing Ice Hockey Association. Many small venues have been introduced since 2016 to provide younger players the opportunity to master the sport.
These two pucks might look exactly the same in size, but this one on my right is actually much lighter. It is specially designed for children. They normally weigh around 80 grams to 130 grams. Pucks for adults weigh around 170 grams. And as for goal cages, you might not notice the difference from a distance, but close up, you can see how small they are compared with adult ones. These are 90 centimeters high and 130 centimeters wide, which are about 70% the size of adult cages.
Using smaller ice rinks, pucks, and goal cages, it's a way to train younger kids to play ice hockey internationally. It's better for their physical health, and it can keep them interested in the game by lowering the threshold for playing it.
The Beijing Ice Hockey Association says although more and more people have picked up ice hockey since 2016, when China won the bid to host the 2002 Winter Olympics, it's still not very well known in the country. And one of the most important ways to promote the sport is to cultivate interest in younger children. Cao Chufeng, CGTN, Beijing.
The headlines once again. Climate and COVID, G20 leaders look to tackle the planet's two biggest challenges as they meet in person for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Completely unjustified, Britain's Prime Minister tells the EU's chief that French threats may break international law as the row over fishing rights escalates. In a moment, my colleague Stephen Cole will be here with the agenda. In this week's show, he'll be speaking to some of the most important people striving to save the planet as the world's eyes look to Glasgow for COP26. That's the agenda with Stephen Cole right after The World Today here on CGTN. And that is your World Today. Thank you for watching. More news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's the agenda with Stephen Cole. For now, from all of the team here in London, goodbye.